All right. So let's see what's going on this week. Um, Niha has added support for the new client endpoints in CBT for Teuthology task. That's kind of going through final rounds of testing here to make sure it works. But once that's in, it means that with just kind of our initial FIO benchmark that uses this, we can run tests against both uh, Ceph, Fuse, and kernel client, and RBD using any of the librd, kernel RBD, NBD, TCMU. Is that right? Yeah. The basically the iSCSI stuff, or I think there's another one too. Well, anyway, via many different multiple methods, we can very easily run the exact same benchmarks against all of them. So that's kind of exciting, and that will hopefully land soon. Um, let's see, there's a PG mapping cache PR that Sage has been reviewing. He mentioned it earlier. Apparently, it's actually uh, providing a relatively substantial improvement. So that's really good. Radic has been going crazy working on this input buffer factory stuff for Crimson, looking at fragmentation and generally just kind of trade-offs between different ways of doing this in terms of how it affects performance at different I/O sizes. So lots of info there. I was hoping he might be able to talk a little bit about it, but I don't think he was able to make it to the meeting today. So let's see. And then the other big one this week is that Adam's next iteration of his sharded Blue Store work is there's a PR for it now. That is a big PR, lots of commits, so it'll need a review from somebody, but it's going to be a doozy, I think. Let's see, a couple closed this week. Jason's Messenger async one that I mentioned last week. This reduces syscalls. I think there was a notable performance improvement with it, so that's good. The only two other ones that we've got, both were closed by the stale bot. A little sad on both, but is what it is. One is to reduce the number of BlueFS space allocations. The other one was one that Igor had been working on a while back to land tiny appends only into the DB. That one, I'm wondering if we still are interested in, but see. So stuff that was updated. There's this recovery ops initialized by client op at higher priority, I think. Niha, you reviewed that. What's going on with that
Yeah.
one?
Yeah, so the idea is that when there is a recovery that is triggered just because the client I/O needs to proceed, we bump up the priority of such kind of recoveries. And that way you don't block the client I/O. I think it makes sense. So yeah, it's a small change as well. So
Cool. All right. And it looks like Eric's multi-site sync fairness one has gotten an update this week, although I confess I didn't look real closely at what it was. And Adam's work continues on, I object and objection sustained.
Yes,
There was yes. Is it proceeding nicely?
it is in Teuthology right now for another round of testing, and hopefully Teuthology will not find anything, but and then we can merge it, assuming people want to review it. And I mean, I guess if nobody wants to review it and nobody requests changes, but anyway, if it passes Teuthology, then we should be able to merge it in. I have some follow-up work on the same thing, but now that it's been hitting, I think 150 commits by now, it'd be kind of nice to get in.
Yeah. It's exciting though. I'm really looking forward to it. So it'll be fun to see it merge.
I agree. I think it's going to need some testing in CephFS and RBD also, though.
RGW is sort of the first one because RGW is the only direct consumer, but I plan to also, as he says, test against RBD and CephFS. Actually, I'd kind of like at some point to see about adapting RBD to use the new library as well. CephFS doesn't use the Rados library; it uses Objector directly.
How much work would that take?
It's just something I've been thinking about.
Cool. Well, yeah. Looking forward to seeing it get in, and then we'll see if the sky's the limit, maybe, right? All right. Next PR. There's an update for the IO ring, IO engine work that Roman is doing. I confess I haven't looked at that since Cephalocon, so I need to get back to that to review it again and see how badly the new locking slowed it down. But that's there and ready to be looked at if other folks are interested too. There's this object store op create one. I don't remember what that is. Sorry, but apparently it got updated. I finally reviewed Igor's small PR here for making auto tuning more aggressive on startup. I've owed him that forever, so I finally did it. It's I'm not totally sure if it's a good idea to make the interval for changing the cache size bigger. That PR changes it from 1 second to 5 seconds instead. The advantage with it being bigger is that it's less work. The mempool thread is doing this 5 times less often, but I haven't seen it using a ton of CPU even at a 1 second interval. And the downside potentially is that we don't respond to cache changes as quickly. So the case where this kind of shows up sometimes is during the initial onode growth when you first start up the OSD and you've got a bunch of BlueStar onodes started being populated. If you make that interval too small, or sorry, too big, so it waits too long before updating, you could potentially start having cache misses, and then onodes don't make it into cache, and it's just doesn't work quite as well. So I want to know from Igor why he wanted to reduce that. Everything else in there looks reasonable, though. Oh, Igor, you're here. Sorry.
We'll revise your comments and the PR itself because it took a while to. I don't remember all the details right now, so
sure,
they'll come back.
It's kind of hard too, right? Because it totally depends on how fast you're reading onodes in to the cache. If your device isn't very fast, then having a lower interval could make sense, or I'm sorry, a bigger interval could make sense. But if you're on a super fast device, you probably want iterating through really quickly so that you can grow the cache as fast as you need it to grow to not run out of space. So yeah, trade-offs. Okay. Then the last PR here that was updated was this distributed data cache one. Adam, you reviewed that, I think, at one point.
PR is this?
24500, so this is the Rados GW distributed data cache.
Oh yes. I didn't look too much at the caching part. I was just helping to refactor the IO throttle stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Mark Hogan is the one that's working most closely on this one.
Cool. All right. Well, that's it for stuff that's been updated this week. There's a bunch of stuff that's old, but maybe the only, well, maybe the two in here that are kind of interesting at the moment, that I'm hoping continue to be updated. There's more than that, I guess, but the user space IO Git event that Kifu wrote, it would be good to continue looking at that. That's an idea that I think he got out of both Crimson, or sorry, out of both C-Star and out of FIO. That might be better than what we're doing now. And then there's also this epoll events from user space, although that's really experimental, not in the kernel yet. There's also the auto tuning of MDS cache memory limit, and there's the mon equivalent of that as well. That's in the works that needs another review today. So both of those things we need to make sure continue to make it their way through. All right, that's all I've got for PRs. Anyone else had any comments on PRs or anything that they wanted to mention? Okay. Well, I've got a couple of different discussion topics here that we can go through. I mentioned that Niha was working on getting the client endpoint support in CBT into Tathology. I think that Kifu has mentioned that he is interested in using that for Crimson testing, and then also, we can use that for just nightly testing in general for traditional Ceph. And last week we had also talked a little bit about also using CBT for Jenkins, and Alfredo might be interested in potentially helping out on that. So one of the things I wanted to talk a little bit about is kind of some future direction ideas with CBT that have been kind of kicking around in my head for a while. One of the kind of long-standing things I've wanted to do with it is take the cluster definition and make it in the YAML and make it kind of more abstract and generic, so that we can implement different kinds of clusters. For Ceph, the big one here would be something like a Ceph Ansible backend, so that instead of only having the ability to create Ceph clusters through CBT, it could farm that out to whatever our current installation method is. That's been kind of a long-standing request from like the reference architecture guys that want to make sure that they're testing on a cluster that was deployed using kind of the same tools that a user would use. So that I think would be useful. But beyond just Ceph Ansible or whatever other Ceph backend we'd use there, we could implement things like cluster implementation. And now that we have the client endpoints, as long as that cluster can have endpoints that are of the same type as Ceph, so like a block endpoint or a file system endpoint or something, then the benchmarks should be able to use it, and we can do direct comparisons of Gluster and Ceph with almost like the same YAML file. So that would be kind of a really interesting thing, I think, if we could get that working. Other things could be Swift, or even like a local cluster class that might be used for things like FIO with a local object store, or FIO directly on disks. We have a benchmark that sort of does that already, but it's kind of like a one-off FIO thing, and it'd be nice to have this kind of through that client endpoint framework that we now have. So those are kind of things I've been thinking about a little bit as maybe potentially being useful. Anyone have any thoughts on any of that? Would that be interesting for folks, or is that kind of not useful?
I'm kind of curious about the idea of adding more installation methods with the ability to use an existing cluster. It seems like that should already be pretty easy to do.
Yeah, Yeah. So, right now we've got like that use existing flag, and it basically just means that CBT doesn't try to create a cluster at all, right? It just, runs on whatever someone else has already set up.
Right.
The thing that kind of is problematic right now is that because CBT doesn't know anything at all about the cluster, like how it was set up at all, it can't do things like it doesn't know where like how the disks were created or where the OSDs are mounted, so it won't know anything about being able to run a block trace there, or potentially doing some other kind of metric analysis, or setting like read ahead on particular block devices, which it can do when you have CBT deploy the cluster. So those are maybe things that would be nice if we could, at least on the monitoring side, if we could make it so that you could CBT had some knowledge about how the cluster was deployed, and then could still make use of some of those features.
I wonder if you could kind of figure that out itself as well.
Sorry, what was that, Josh?
I wonder if we could figure that out from an existing cluster and kind of add the monitoring to it.
Maybe
automatically.
I think so. When we are running CBT using Tautology, we are already using the use existing thing, but there is a bit of spoon feeding that we need to do just to give CBT the cluster section of the YAML it requires. Maybe making that more like an auto discovery that CBT does, that if there is an use existing flag set, it goes and discovers a few things automatically, would be useful in these scenarios, I think.
Yeah. One of the things that is really irritating right now for that cluster section is that a lot of information from the ceph.conf file gets duplicated. So it would be interesting too if it could either use the ceph.conf file or command line tools or something else to try to like auto discover a bunch of information about the cluster, if it's use existing, or if it's, even if it's going to set up everything itself, if it can read that from somewhere.
Yeah, like for example, OSD metadata I think contains the disks that the OSDs are using already. So CBT could get that information pretty simply and get the host information from the OSD map too.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that sounds good. So maybe that would be a good aim for some of this, is to make it so that the whole cluster section kind of gets rearranged, instead of being just like, you put a bunch of Ceph stuff in there. Maybe you define what kind of clusters you want to create, and then we revamp the Ceph portion of that to do a bunch of auto discovery, and then potentially, maybe you could also target different Ceph deployment mechanisms if you want to make the deployment happen through CBT using those, or just use existing could be another option. Maybe even its own class in an existing cluster, then just does auto discovery. Cool. Yeah. That could be good.
I kind of expect if you didn't end up adding like multiple installation methods, not all of them would necessarily give you the direct access to which block devices are there or that sort of information. So you might end up needing the auto discovery for those later as well.
Yeah, agreed. So kind of tangential to that, but sort of related, is Sage had mentioned being interested in having CBT be able to use containers. So I've done a little bit with Kubernetes. It kind of terrifies me a little bit. It's really big. But I was looking a little bit at Minikube, and that seemed a little bit more reasonable. What would people think about being able to take like a container that has, a benchmark already set up in it, or, OSDs or something, and using something like CBT for orchestrating that Does that make any sense?
Well, you don't necessarily have to use Kubernetes to use containers. I'll put that out there.
True. What would you?
If we're just looking at the performance impact of containers, it's kind of just a different installation method that just happens to run them in containers. No orchestrator. Well, beyond CBT, that is.
Yeah, CBT would basically just act as a really simple one that would, stand them up and then run stuff.
Doesn't Ceph Ansible have a container mode? Would that be easy to use?
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, it does have a container mode. I'm not sure how easy it would be to integrate with CBT.
We'd still need something that would start up the benchmarks though. We'd need containers for each benchmark and then have something that would launch them in different places.
That isn't necessarily true. You could run you're not interested in the impact of containerization on the benchmark. You're interested in the impact of containerization, I'm guessing, on the OSD in this context. So not necessarily.
Sure. I guess I was thinking that would be convenient.
Actually, you'd want to conduct, even if you did care, you'd want to conduct both versions of the experiment.
Sure.
Also kind of depends what your goal is with container testing. If you want to test the impact of containers, then you only need containers, not orchestration. If you want to test as an end user might be using this, then that's a different story.
You'd probably want CBT to be able to arbitrarily use a container for a benchmark, or just kind of do the traditional bare metal benchmark testing that it does now. It'd be really nice if it was just an option change, use these clients or use these containers. Okay. So anyway, yeah, that's kind of, I guess, more or less it for now. I'm hoping to rope Orlando. He's not here today, but I'm hoping to rope him into maybe doing some UI work and result parsing work. And that's kind of the other big piece that we've been needing for a long time. With those, though, I mean, hopefully that would kind of get to be in a state where I think more folks will be able to use it. Oh, there's Orlando now, actually. Hey, Orlando, I just mentioned you. I was hoping to rope you in maybe on working on some of the CBT graphing pieces.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sorry, I'm late.
No
I
worries.
was just looking at the master CBT, getting all that to work. Now I see there's a branch for results parser. Is that kind of the branch you're using to get the results figured out into a database?
Yeah, so that was a branch I had been working on several months ago, maybe even more, 6 or 7 months ago, and then got distracted with other stuff. But that was kind of a first, attempt at exploring some of those ideas. And then that actually, I think that branch is pretty big. It's got a lot of other stuff that needs to be split out from it. I think some of these other things that are that we've been talking about here regarding kind of cluster definitions and some of the first ideas for client endpoint testing were in there too. So yeah, my guess is that that's probably a kind of cluttered branch, but yeah, some of it might be kind of some of the ideas for this too, for the graphing and result parsing.
Oh, okay, I see.
So yeah, the idea, I think, at least in my mind, would be that we've got these hash encoded directory structures, and we can just build indexes for them. And and then have some kind of query engine for being able to quickly extract performance results or other info and metrics that we want from those tests.
Right.
Something else for graph generation on top of that. Cool. All right. I think that's basically all I've got on the CBT side. The other thing I wanted to bring up for the meeting, but Adam's not here and Sage isn't here, so this might not be. This I guess will be pretty quick. With all the changes that we're making with RocksDB, we are going to need to think really carefully about how we are laying data out across column families. Adam's work is going to end up resulting in a column family per shard. When you layer my double caching, avoiding double caching work on top of that, that means now we have 2 column families per shard at least. And then Sage had a PR that, or an idea, I'm not sure if there's code yet, for doing per pool key prefixes, which I'm not sure how that would interact with either the sharding or my stuff, but I'm worried that might kind of result in an explosion of column families if we're trying to do.
His idea, we talked about this a little bit yesterday in the Octopus planning. I think his idea there was just to add that as another piece of the path. So within a given column family, not creating any additional ones.
So maybe I misheard him, but I thought he was planning on having that prefix be before the OMAP prefix or other prefixes.
I think, I guess maybe I'm not entirely clear, but I thought he was saying it would be within a given column family. So it'd still be the prefix for a column family, and then the pool prefix, and then whatever else.
Okay. If it's like that, then that would definitely work out much better. So probably just need to talk to Sage then and find out what he was thinking.
Yeah.
But yeah, so related to that, Adam's testing my change on top of his changes. So hopefully we'll find out soon how that works. But Adam's changes seem to do a really good job of reducing write amp during compaction. And my stuff, it seems like, is doing a good job of avoiding the double caching, which results in pretty significant performance improvements when faced with more data in the working set than fits in cache, especially more ONA data. Yeah, but if those both can end up getting in for Octopus, don't know if they will or not, but I think that would be a really big win for us. So yeah, that's basically all I've got, guys. Anything else for this week? Anyone have anything they want to bring up or talk about? All right. Well, then have a great week, guys.
Thanks, Mark. You too.
Yep. See you later.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye-bye.